He found the envelope before he found his wife. Just a plain white rectangle on the kitchen table, sitting right beside his favorite travel mug, yet it hit Ethan harder than any storm he'd worked through. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes a man realize he hasn't really seen his home, or the woman in it, for a very long time. Outside, the lake was still. Inside, something in him cracked open as he read the first word on the page. But the truth is, this story isn't about the end of a marriage. It's about the moment a man realizes he's been losing something long before he knew it was slipping away, and the woman who decided she would rather break the silence than break herself. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe now. Let's begin. The lake was still a dark sheet of glass when Mia Clark stepped into the kitchen that morning, the old floorboards creaking under her bare feet. A thin mist clung to the water outside, soft as breath, drifting across the surface like something unsure of where it belonged. The sky had not yet decided to lighten. It hovered in that quiet blue before sunrise, the kind of blue where secrets felt heavier. Mia pulled her oversized sweatshirt closer around her shoulders. It belonged to Ethan once, back when they were newly married, and anything of his felt like comfort. Now it simply felt large on her, as if she were a child wearing clothes meant for someone else's life. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of papers spread in front of her. The heading at the top, printed in crisp black ink, looked colder than any winter wind off the lake. Petition for divorce. Her fingers trembled as she smoothed the pages. The pen lay to her right, a slim silver one Ethan had given her on their 7th anniversary. He had engraved her initials on it. M.C. Something for all your stories, he had said back then, pride lighting his face. A small, sad smile touched her lips. She wondered if he even remembered that gift existed. Her mind drifted back, an uninvited montage of broken promises. It'll be better after this project. I just need a few more weeks. Things are crazy right now, but it'll calm down soon. Every excuse stacked on top of the last, building a wall between them so quietly she hadn't realized she'd been shut out until the door was locked. She had believed him the first dozen times, maybe even the first 100. Mia inhaled, slow and shaky, and whispered into the quiet kitchen. The pen felt heavier than it should as she picked it up. Her signature, once fluid and confident, came out jagged on the page. She blinked hard, chasing away the wetness gathering behind her eyes. Crying wouldn't change the truth. And the truth was simple. She had been alone in this marriage for a long time. Her hand dropped the pen, and she exhaled as though she'd been holding her breath for months. Maybe she had. It took her a moment to fold the papers neatly, sliding them into a cream-colored envelope. She wrote his name on the front, Ethan, in her soft looping script, the same handwriting she used on his birthday cards, on notes tucked in his lunchbox in the early years. On every promise she made to hold their life together, she placed the envelope on the table. At first in the center, then she moved it to the edge. Then finally, after a long moment of staring at it, she set it right beside his favorite travel mug. The steel tumbler he reached for every single morning without fail. He won't miss it now, she thought. Mia stood there quietly, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the two objects side by side, an ordinary mug and an extraordinary ending. The simplicity of it felt cruel. Her car keys were cold in her hand as she headed toward the door. Before stepping outside into the misty dawn, she paused and glanced back at the kitchen one last time, the worn farmhouse table, the dim light, the envelope waiting like a truth she could no longer unsay. "This is the only way you'll hear me," she whispered to the empty room. Then she left for the library, pulling the door shut behind her with a gentleness that surprised even her. Ethan didn't see the envelope that morning. He had left long before sunrise, boots thudding across the porch as he hurried to his truck. There was a new project on the south side of Atlanta, a complex retaining wall build, and deadlines were snapping at his heels. He hadn't kissed Mia goodbye. He hadn't even checked if the bedroom light was on or off. He simply grabbed his gear and left. Mind already full of measurements, permits, and concrete estimates. The day blurred into its usual chaos. Shouting over machinery, arguments with subcontractors, climbing in and out of trenches, reviewing plans while dust stung his eyes. His phone buzzed often, but none of the notifications were from Mia. Not that he noticed. By the time he finally drove home, the sun had long fallen behind the trees. His shoulders ached, his head throbbed, and his boots were caked with Georgia red clay that clung to everything it touched. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow onto the wooden steps, and for a fleeting second he allowed himself to imagine Mia waiting up for him with a soft smile and a plate of something reheated. But the house felt quiet when he opened the door. Too quiet. He forced off his boots, left them by the mat, and rubbed the back of his neck. Lit only by the small lamp by the sink. He reached instinctively for his travel mug. He always rinsed it out before bed. But his hand froze halfway. The mug wasn't alone. An envelope lay beside it. Plain, neat, heavy-looking. His name written in Mia's familiar handwriting. Mia? His voice echoed slightly in the empty hallway. There was no answer. A faint pressure tightened in his chest as he picked it up. The weight of the envelope felt wrong, too many pages inside. He swallowed hard, sensing something shift inside him, something that felt like the first crack running through a foundation he had assumed was solid. He slid a thumb under the flap and opened it. The papers unfolded easily, like they had been waiting for this moment. His eyes scanned the heading, and stopped. Petition for divorce. The words stared back at him, sharp as a knife. His breath caught. The kitchen swayed slightly. The house around him, silent and still, felt suddenly foreign, as if he had walked into someone else's life by mistake. Then the truth settled in, cold and undeniable. This was his life, his marriage, his doing. Ethan sank into the nearest chair, the papers trembling in his hands, his heartbeat pounding loud enough to drown out the quiet of the room. And for the first time in years, he realized he had finally heard her. But it might be far too late. The morning sun had barely cleared the treetops when Mia pulled out of the driveway, heading toward the small-town library where she worked part-time. The radio hummed softly, some old country ballad drifting through the speakers, but she barely heard a word. Her hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, eyes unfocused as memory, not the road, took the lead. How long had it been since she let herself remember the early days? A curl of mist still clung to the lake as she drove past it, catching a flash of silver across the water. It stirred something in her, something warm and bittersweet, because once upon a time, she and Ethan had spent entire evenings right there, watching the lake shimmer as the sky turned pink. She could almost see them now, younger, brighter, full of the kind of hope you don't realize is fragile until it breaks. Her mind drifted back to the day they first met. It was 12 years ago, at a free health fair sponsored by the county hospital. She had volunteered for the weekend, wearing scrubs and running blood pressure checks for older residents. Ethan had been hired to repair a damaged wheelchair ramp outside the community center. She remembered catching sight of him through the double doors, sawdust clinging to his jeans, sweat darkening the back of his t-shirt, a pencil tucked behind his ear. He had looked frustrated with the ramp until someone cracked a joke, and then that frustration had turned into the warm, crinkly-eyed smile she came to love far too much. He approached her table at the end of the day, cleared his throat, and asked, "So, does taking my blood pressure count as a pickup line?" She laughed, really laughed, the kind that bubbled up from her chest, and the sound startled both of them. He grinned, wide and genuine, and she felt that ridiculous, unmistakable spark. Funny how a life can begin by accident. Their first date wasn't glamorous. He took her to a diner off Highway 9, the kind with laminated menus and waitresses who called everyone Hon. They sat in a red vinyl booth, knees almost touching. She ordered a simple salad. He asked for the meatloaf special. They shared a slice of apple pie because she insisted she wasn't hungry enough for dessert. And he insisted she absolutely was. What she remembered most wasn't the food, but the conversation. Easy, unforced. They talked about the future, like two kids drawing imaginary maps. And when the waitress refilled their coffees for the third time, neither of them even noticed how late it had gotten. Driving now past the tall pines lining the road, Mia smiled faintly at the memory. She could still taste the warmth of that night, You still feel the shift when Ethan walked her to her car and hesitated, just long enough to make her heart flutter, before kissing her under a flickering parking lot light. Their early marriage had been a patchwork of simplicity, threadbare but perfect. They rented a tiny beige house with slanted floors and a heater that rattled like an old truck. Their couch had been a hand-me-down from Ethan's sister, and one of the cushions always sagged. They didn't care. They spent Friday nights on the floor anyway, backs against the couch, popcorn between them, watching movies on a TV so small it made them lean close together. She remembered his habit of slipping an arm around her shoulders halfway through every film, even the ones he pretended not to like. She'd rest her head on him, hearing the steady beat of his heart, and think. But life kept offering more, and they kept saying yes. During her hospital shifts, he would drop by with takeout stir-fry, tacos, sometimes just a smoothie when she was too tired to chew. He'd wait for her in the break room, boots tapping the tile floor, eyes lighting up the second she walked in. She would bring brownies to his job sites, setting a small container beside his toolbox before kissing him quick, knowing the guys were probably watching from the scaffolding. It was messy and imperfect and loud and wonderful. And the lake god, the lake. They would sit on the tailgate of his truck after work, legs swinging, sipping cheap lemonade straight from the bottle. The sunset would bleed orange over the water, bugs buzzing around them in lazy circles. They talked about the house they someday wanted to build. A porch where she could read and he could nap. A swing where they could grow old together. It had felt so certain, so obvious, that the future would be kind to them if they just worked hard enough. Mia blinked, coming back into the present as she turned onto the gravel road leading toward town. The library came into view, small, brick, familiar. She slowed the car, but her chest tightened with the contrast between the memories humming through her and the life she lived now. Because they did get the house, they did get the porch, and they did get the swing. She parked but didn't open the door right away. Her eyes drifted toward the lake again, visible through the trees. Most evenings these days, she sat on that porch swing alone. The wood creaked beneath her. The space beside her stayed empty. Sometimes she left room for him by instinct, just a little extra space, as if her body remembered something her heart had forgotten long ago. But he never came out. Or if he did, it was only to take a call. Pacing the length of the railing with his phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent, eyes somewhere far from home, she pressed her forehead against the steering wheel for a moment, letting the ache settle. How had they gotten so far from that diner booth, from that tailgate by the lake, from those nights on the floor eating popcorn and dreaming? A soft truth whispered through her mind, uninvited but undeniable. We got everything we said we wanted. Somewhere along the way, we lost the part that mattered. The memory of the envelope on the kitchen table flickered through her, a quiet, heavy reminder. She lifted her head, inhaled, and opened the car door. Today would be like any other day. Except it wasn't. Deep inside, something had already shifted. Something she could no longer pretend not to feel. The alarm on Ethan's phone buzzed at 5:12 a.m., a harsh, metallic sound that sliced through the darkness. He groaned, slapped blindly at the nightstand until the noise stopped, then swung his legs over the side of the bed. It was still pitch black outside. The lake looked like a piece of inked glass through the window. He didn't look to his right. That half of the bed had been empty most mornings. By 5:45 he was out the door, boots laced, thermos filled, lunch tossed hastily into his truck. Gravel crunched under the tires as he pulled away from the house. Inside, Mia slept lightly, though she would later swear she barely dozed at all. The long drive toward Atlanta was always the same. Traffic thickening by the mile, headlights glaring, brake lights flashing like warnings. Ethan listened to the radio more for noise than for content. His mind listed everything, waiting for him: permit revisions, delayed shipments, subcontractors arguing over schedules, and always, the pressure from above. He rubbed the side of his jaw, where stress tended to settle. Too old, he muttered under his breath. Too damn old for this. 47 wasn't ancient by any means, but on the job site, the younger managers, sharp suits, Sharper elbows watched him like wolves waiting for a stumble. He felt it every day. One wrong move, and they'd take his place. So he pushed harder, stayed longer, answered every call. "I'm doing this for us," he told himself every morning, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. For the mortgage, for the future, for stability. The words had become a kind of prayer, one he repeated, so often he'd stopped questioning whether it was true. By the time he reached the site, the chaos had already begun. Trucks backing in, cranes groaning, workers calling out measurements above the roar of machinery. Dust swirled through the air like a second atmosphere. His phone buzzed endlessly: emails, updates, questions, demands. He barely looked up from the rolled-out blueprints all morning. He didn't see Mia's text from the night before. Her day was quieter, softer, almost painfully so. The library smelled faintly of old paper and lemon cleaner. At this hour, the place was nearly empty, just a few retirees wandering the aisles, pausing to chat with Mia about new arrivals or the weather. She liked their gentle rhythms, their slow, careful steps between shelves. It reminded her of a world less frantic than the one Ethan lived in. During children's story time, she sat cross-legged on a rug shaped like a giant sunflower, while toddlers gathered around, leaning into each other with wide, eager eyes. She read "Goodnight Moon" and "The Very Hungry Caterpillar," doing the voices the way she always did. The kids laughed. A few reached for her hand, but once the room grew quiet again, once the last little sneaker disappeared around the corner, the silence felt bigger. She checked her phone. No reply. Her message, sent just after she'd washed the dishes last night, still sat unanswered. "Can we eat together tomorrow?" She stared at the tiny smile emoji, wishing she could take it back. It looked too hopeful now. Too naive. She turned the phone face down and tried to refocus on reshelving books, but her mind drifted repeatedly to the kitchen she would return to tonight, the table she would set carefully, the pot roast she would slow cook the way he loved, the small candle she'd light because meals were supposed to feel warm, even if they didn't. By late afternoon, clouds gathered outside the tall library windows, darkening the sky. The world outside felt heavier. She closed up at 5, turning off the lights one by one, each click echoing through the empty aisles. On the drive home, she rehearsed a dozen different ways to ask him gently, calmly, to spend more time with her. None of the words felt right. She'd asked before. She'd begged without sounding like she was begging. And still, every "soon" from Ethan stretched into another empty night. By 6, the house smelled like garlic, rosemary, and slow-braised beef. Mia set the round wooden table with the good plates, the ceramic ones they'd bought from a potter near Lake Hartwell years ago. She placed 2 napkins folded neatly. A small candle flickered in the middle. It felt like a scene from a life that didn't exist anymore. 7 o'clock came. The food stayed warm under the low oven heat. 8 o'clock. Her phone remained stubbornly silent. She tried distracting herself, opened a book, closed it, watered the fern by the window, stepped onto the porch to breathe in the cooling air. Every passing car made her glance up. 9:30. A vibration broke the quiet. Her heart jumped at the sound. Ridiculous, she told herself. She already knew what the message would say. Running late. Don't wait up. Just 4 words. No apology. No explanation. No, "I'm sorry, honey." No, "I miss you." Not even a promise to try again tomorrow. She stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then she turned off the oven, set one plate on the counter, and wrapped the other in foil. She placed it carefully in the fridge, beside leftovers from 3 nights ago that he also never touched. The house creaked with the settling night. Outside, wind rustled through the pines. Mia ate alone at the table. No candle this time, just the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet clink of her fork. When she finished, she washed her plate, dried it, put it away. Every movement small, precise. Practiced. Upstairs, she slipped into bed and turned off the lamp. She didn't expect him to come, but she still listened for the sound of his truck. It was nearly midnight when she heard the gravel crunch outside, the heavy thump of his boots on the porch. Then the quiet click of the front door. She closed her eyes and slowed her breathing. pretending to be asleep. Pretending she wasn't waiting for his footsteps on the stairs. Pretending she wasn't hoping he'd come lie beside her. Even if only out of habit. But the footsteps never came. Instead, the muffled sound of the TV drifted up from downstairs. Low at first. Then a little louder. He'd fallen asleep on the couch again. The bedsheets around her felt too big, too cool, too empty. And she lay awake, staring into the dark, knowing that a house didn't need to be empty to feel deserted. Mia woke to the soft glow of morning slipping through the curtains. The lake outside turning pale gold under the rising sun. For a moment, half asleep, she almost forgot what day it was. Then her eyes found the sticky note she had placed on her nightstand the night before. Just a small square of yellow paper with a hand-drawn heart and the number 10 under it. 10 years of marriage. She reached for her phone immediately. No messages, no missed calls, no good morning, no happy anniversary. She swallowed and set the phone down, telling herself it was early. He'd remember. He had to. Downstairs, she moved quietly through the kitchen, careful not to make too much noise in case Ethan had somehow come upstairs during the night. But of course, the space beside her bed had stayed cold. The sound of the TV drifting up the stairs last night had eventually faded, followed by nothing. She walked to the coffee maker and placed another sticky note on the counter beside it. Happy 10 years, Ethan. Dinner at 7 p.m. She added a little heart, hoping it would soften the message, make him smile, jog his memory. She wanted today to be gentle. She wanted today to mean something. Mia spent the next hour moving through the kitchen with the quiet purposefulness of someone preparing a gift instead of a meal. Pot roast had always been his favorite. But tonight she planned something different: grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, fresh rolls. A light meal, something they could enjoy while watching the slideshow she'd prepared. The slideshow had taken her weeks. She'd gone through old USB drives, dusty boxes, even the backup folder on their ancient laptop. She arranged the photos in order. Their first trip to the mountains, their 5th anniversary picnic, Ethan laughing on the tailgate of his truck, her smiling in the hospital parking lot, holding a bag of takeout he brought during a night shift. Pictures of them with windblown hair, sunburned noses, eyes soft with the kind of affection people rarely bother to photograph. She had loaded it onto the TV early that morning, hitting play once just to see it. Their voices echoing faintly from old videos had filled the living room until her eyes blurred. He'll remember, she reminded herself again. He always used to remember. Her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped only for it to fall again. By noon, she checked her phone again. Still nothing. By 2, she checked 5 more times. By 3, she felt ridiculous, so she placed the phone face down and forced herself not to look at it. At 4, she couldn't help it. She checked. Nothing. The ache in her chest began to sink lower, heavier, as if gravity itself had changed. When 5 o'clock arrived, she began getting ready. She washed her hair. Ender bowed. Duan that, wan ready. Blow-dried it. Found the soft blue dress, Ethan once said, brought out her eyes. She applied a little mascara, a touch of lipstick. Nothing dramatic, just enough to feel like the woman she once was when she felt seen. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Will he even notice? The thought came uninvited, sharp enough to sting. Downstairs, the house smelled warm and inviting. The table was set, simple plates, cloth napkins, 2 tall white candles she'd been saving for a special night. She dimmed the lights, put on soft music, and then after a long hesitation clicked on their wedding song. Its first notes floated through the quiet room, gentle as a memory. And for a moment, Mia allowed herself to stand there and breathe it in. Eyes fluttering shut. 7 o'clock came. She checked her phone. Nothing. She called him. Straight to voicemail. 7:15. She refreshed the texts. Nothing. The salmon was finished. The vegetables were cooling. 7:30. She sat at the table and folded the napkin on her lap. Then unfolded it. Then folded it again. Or 8 o'clock. Her voicemail still sat unheard. The little, one missed call meant nothing to him. She stared at the empty chair across from her, willing him to walk in, willing the front door to open, willing the sound of his boots to echo in the hallway. Nothing. 8:30. She blew out a quiet breath, picked up her fork, put it back down. 9 o'clock. The candle wax had begun to pool at the base, dripping onto the ceramic plate she placed underneath. The slideshow was still paused on the TV, the picture of them on their 3rd anniversary hike, his arm around her, her head tilted back in laughter. Her phone vibrated at 9:30. Her breath caught. It was a text. 4 words. Long day. Stuck at the site. I'll grab something on the way home. No apology. No mention of the day. No question about whether she was waiting. No recognition of the hours she'd sat at the table alone. Just logistics. Mia stood there in the quiet room, surrounded by the ghost of their wedding song. Staring at the candles, at the food she'd prepared, at the empty chair that had felt empty for far longer than just tonight. The music ended. Silence took its place, like a curtain falling. She reached for the candles one by one, blew them out slowly. The kitchen darkened around her, shadows stretching across the floor. As the last flame disappeared, she felt something extinguish inside her, too soft, small, but irreversible. She sank into the chair, letting the silence settle. And somewhere deep in her chest, where hope had lived for years, a quiet, steady realization formed. He didn't forget the anniversary. He forgot her. The house hummed gently with the sound of the refrigerator, the clock ticking on the wall, the wind brushing the windows. And Mia, sitting alone in her soft blue dress, felt the truth pull tighter around her. A truth she was no longer sure she could ignore. The house felt colder than it should have that night. Maybe it was the leftover chill from the storm that had swept through earlier, rattling the windows and bending the trees. Or maybe it was something else, something settling inside Mia, something hollow and final. She lay awake long after midnight, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft, distant snore rising from downstairs. Ethan had claimed he was too wiped out to come up to their bedroom tonight. He'd dropped his tool belt by the front door, mumbled something about his back hurting, and stretched out on the guest bed downstairs. He hadn't mentioned the anniversary, not in the doorway, not in any tired apology, not at all. At 1:47 a.m., Mia sat up slowly, gathering the comforter around her shoulders. The bed felt enormous. The shadows long. The clock glowed green on the nightstand, the numbers shifting silently. She swung her legs over the side, feet brushing the cool hardwood floor. She reached for her laptop. Its hinge clicked softly as she opened it, the dim screen illuminating her face in pale blue light. For a long moment, she just stared at the search bar, empty and blinking, blinking, blinking like a heartbeat waiting for a reason to continue. Her fingers hovered above the keys. A question rose inside her, unsteady and frightened. Is this really that bad? Another. Am I overreacting? Am I just tired? And then, or am I finally telling myself the truth? The truth she had been avoiding. The truth she had tiptoed around. The truth she had swallowed with every cold dinner and unanswered text. Her throat tightened. She typed slowly. How to know when it's time to leave your marriage. The results populated instantly. Articles, blog posts, forums filled with stories from women in their late 30s, 40s, 50s. Women talking about feeling invisible inside the home they shared with someone who once adored them. Women who described waiting at a dinner table long after the food cooled. Women who carried the weight of a marriage alone, day after day, until one morning they realized they'd disappeared from their own lives. Mia clicked through them, one after another. Every story sounded like hers. Every line felt like a mirror. A woman wrote, "The first time he forgot our anniversary, I let it slide. The 5th time, I realized it wasn't forgetfulness. It was indifference." Another woman wrote, "I knew I had already left him emotionally the night I spent more time talking to my dog than my husband." Another, "You can love someone deeply and still know they're not choosing you anymore." Mia felt tears prick the edges of her eyes, not loud, dramatic ones, but the kind that gather because there's nowhere else for the truth to go. She wiped them away with the back of her hand. Why did it hurt so much to read words she already knew? She scrolled down further, farther, deeper, until her breathing steadied, not calmer, but clearer. The ache remained, yes, but it was no longer tangled with confusion. It settled into something sharper. Resolve. Her fingers moved again. This time, she typed, "Divorce attorney near me." The phrase looked impossible on her screen. Unrealistic. Like it belonged in someone else's life, someone else's marriage, someone else's heartbreak, but it was hers. All of it. She hesitated just long enough for her breath to catch, then hit enter. A list of local firms filled the page. She clicked on one, with a simple website. No flashy slogans, just a calm promise of guidance through difficult transitions. Mia's chest rose and fell. Slowly, deliberately, her cursor hovered over the Contact Us button. She clicked. A form appeared. Name, email, phone number, brief description of the situation. She typed her name, her email, her number. Then she paused above the blank box. What was she supposed to say? How did a person even begin to describe the slow erosion of a marriage? How did she explain a year of empty dinners, months of silence, a decade of giving more than she received? She typed, "I would like to schedule a consultation about divorce. I need help understanding my options." Simple, honest, devastating. Her finger hovered over the submit button. Her heart pounded, not fast, exactly, but hard, as if each beat were trying to push something out of her chest. This was the moment she could still step back from, the moment she could pretend she was only curious, only overwhelmed, only emotional after a terrible night, but deep inside, she knew better. Her marriage didn't end tonight. It had been ending for years. She was only now giving that truth a voice. Mia exhaled. Her hands stopped trembling, and she clicked send. A small notification popped up. "Thank you for contacting us. A team member will reach out within 24 hours. Her stomach flipped, as if she'd stepped off a cliff she hadn't realized she was standing on. There it was. The point of no return, not legally, maybe, but emotionally. She closed the laptop slowly, the soft click echoing in the quiet bedroom. Her hands settled in her lap. She stared into the dim hallway where light spilled weakly from beneath the door. Somewhere downstairs, Ethan shifted in the guest bed, still asleep, still unaware that the ground beneath their marriage had shifted. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes, trying to breathe through the sudden heaviness. For the first time, it wasn't despair swallowing her. It was clarity. And clarity, she realized, could be more terrifying than heartbreak. She lay back on the bed, but she didn't close her eyes. She couldn't. All she could feel was the quiet hum of a decision she never thought she'd make, vibrating through her, steady and unyielding. Morning would come, and when it did, nothing would be the same. Ethan woke with a start. For a moment, he didn't know where he was, the unfamiliar mattress beneath him, the stiff pillow, the faint chill in the guest room. His back throbbed from falling asleep without meaning to, still in his work shirt. It took him a beat to realize what time it was. He checked the clock on the nightstand. 2:13 a.m. He blinked, rubbing the grit from his eyes, and that's when he noticed the light. A soft glow spilled from beneath the kitchen door at the top of the stairs, stretching a thin, warm line across the dark hallway. He frowned. It wasn't unusual for Mia to be up late when she couldn't sleep, but something about that light felt different tonight. Ethan pushed himself upright and winced. Too many hours bent over blueprints. Too many nights on stiff job site chairs. He pulled his boots on without tying them and climbed the stairs. Halfway up, he heard the faint clink of ceramic. When he reached the kitchen entrance, she was there, sitting at the table in her robe, a mug cupped between both hands. Chamomile tea curled steam upward. Her hair was tied loosely, stray strands falling around her face. Her eyes were red, but dry. Not the fresh red of someone who just cried, but the deep red of someone who ran out of tears hours ago. She didn't look up right away. He stood there, unsure, leaning against the doorframe. "Hey," he said quietly. Mia inhaled slowly before lifting her gaze. "Hi." The one syllable held a weight he couldn't name yet. He walked further inside, scratching his jaw. Couldn't sleep? She didn't answer immediately. She took a sip of tea. A long one. The silence stretched between them, taut and thin. Finally she said, "No." He waited for an explanation, some gentle comment about reading too late or worrying about the weather, but none came. Instead, she looked past him, toward the window where moonlight rippled across the lake. "You're awake late, too," she said softly. "Yeah," he shrugged, rubbing the back of his neck. "Long day. Stayed downstairs 'cause my back's acting up." The words felt flimsy even to him. Mia nodded, eyes still lowered. He looked around the kettle, still warm on the stove. The box of tissues on the table. Her laptop closed but turned slightly toward her. Something unsettled prickled along the back of his mind. He tried again. "Everything okay?" She let out a breath that wasn't quite a sigh. More like a release. "Mia?" She glanced at him, then really looked at him, and the quiet in her gaze made his stomach tighten. "Ethan," she asked gently, "do you know what yesterday was?" He blinked, thought, shrugged. "Tuesday? Why?" She closed her eyes. Just for a moment. When she opened them again, he saw the hurt beneath the calm, sharp, exhausted, and too practiced. "It was our anniversary." The words sat between them like stones. Ethan's expression flickered surprise, guilt, but it was quick, faint, almost reflexive. He rubbed his forehead. "Mia, I'm sorry. You know how it's been. There was an emergency on site, and—" She held up a hand, not abruptly, but firmly. "I'm not asking for an excuse." He fell quiet. She looked down at her mug, fingers tightening around it. "I set the table. You know. Candles, our song. A meal I made from scratch." She swallowed. "I sat there for hours." His chest contracted, a small, involuntary twitch. "I called you." "I know," he murmured. "My phone? You texted at 9:30. He rubbed his mouth with his palm. "Mia, I know I messed up, but things are insane, right?" She looked up again, sharper this time. "Ethan, stop." The word hit harder than she intended, maybe harder than she realized. He froze. Her next inhale trembled. "Do you know the last time we had dinner together? Just sat at the table and talked?" He tried to answer, but nothing came. His mind grabbed at weeks. Months came up empty. Her voice was quiet, almost too quiet. "I don't remember either." The stillness grew colder. He started to reach for the chair across from her, but she shook her head, not angrily, just final. "I need you to listen," she said, "and not explain." He nodded slowly. She swallowed hard, gathering whatever strength was left. "I talked to a divorce attorney tonight." The world shifted, literally. He felt it like the house tilted a few inches under his feet. The air thickened. His pulse spiked. His mouth went dry. He barked a soft, disbelieving laugh. "Come on. That's dramatic." Her jaw tightened. "I'm not being dramatic." He stared at her, waiting for some sign she was bluffing, some crack in her expression that would say, "I didn't mean it." But her eyes were steady, steady in the way people are when they've rehearsed something in their hearts for a long time. "You're serious," he whispered. "I filled out a form online. They'll call me tomorrow." The mug rattled softly in his hand. Mia, you can't be serious," he said again, but the disbelief in his voice was cracking, splintering into something that sounded dangerously close to fear. She held his gaze. "I am." He stepped back from the table as if struck, one hand gripping the counter behind him. "Why would you? How could you?" Her voice cut through his confusion, gentle but unyielding. "Because I've been trying to talk to you for years, Ethan, and this is the only thing that finally made you look at me." He inhaled sharply, chest heaving once, but words failed him. The clock above the stove ticked softly. The lake outside shimmered with moonlight. Inside the kitchen, a truth neither of them wanted to face filled the room until there was barely space left to breathe. And for the first time, Ethan didn't know whether to reach for her or brace for the moment she let go. The kitchen felt too bright. Not from light, only one small bulb glowed above the sink, but from the rawness between them. Everything was exposed now. No soft edges left. Mia sat rigid at the table, fingers wrapped around her mug like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Ethan stood by the counter, chest rising and falling in uneven breaths, hands braced behind him as if the laminate could anchor him. The silence stretched again, long, thin, dangerous. Mia broke it first. "You ignored me," she said quietly. "Not just last night, not just the anniversary, for years, Ethan." He flinched, almost imperceptibly. She continued, not yelling, but each word landing sharp. "You skipped dinners. You walked past me when I was talking. You answered your phone at the table. You left early, came home late. You stopped asking about my day. You stopped looking at me." His mouth opened, but no words came. "And every time I tried to talk," she said, voice trembling now, "you brushed me off. Busy. Stressed. Not now." She swallowed hard. "Do you know what it feels like to be married to someone who treats you like background noise?" His jaw tightened. Something flashed in his eyes, shame, anger, confusion. He stepped forward. "You make it sound like I don't care. Do you?" Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. "Do you even know me anymore?" That struck him. Clean through. His breath caught, then rushed out in one heavy exhale. "Mia, I've been—" "No." She cut in. "Don't tell me you're doing your best." His shoulders stiffened. His voice rose before he meant it to. "I am doing my best, Mia. You have no idea what I'm dealing with." The words echoed louder than either expected. Mia went still. The hurt on her face deepened, but beneath it, something else surfaced. A quiet, steady warning. Ethan froze, startled by himself. He dragged both hands over his face, breathing unevenly. I didn't mean to shout, but the damage had cracked open a door he could no longer hold shut." He sank into the chair across from her. The wood creaked under the sudden weight. His elbows rested on his knees, hands covering his face. "Mia," he murmured into his palms, voice rough. "I didn't want to tell you." She blinked. "Tell me what?" He didn't look up. Her brows knit. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" He dropped his hands slowly, and she saw it, fear etched into the lines of his face, his eyes dark with something deeper than exhaustion. "A few months ago," he began, rubbing the back of his neck, "I went for a routine checkup. Just something the company offered." He swallowed. "The doctor found something." Mia's breath stalled. He continued, voice lower. "I've lost almost 40% of the hearing in my left ear. Permanent loss." Her lips parted. He didn't stop. "There's pressure buildup behind my right eye. Early stage degeneration, maybe dust exposure. They're still running tests." The world slowed around her. "I've been seeing specialists during my lunch breaks," he said, trying to keep it quiet, trying to figure out what it means. "If it gets worse?" His throat worked. "I don't know if I'll be able to stay on site. I don't know if I can keep my job." Mia shook her head slightly, as if her mind couldn't catch up. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I'm supposed to be the reliable one." She stared at him, at the fear he'd hidden under layers of concrete dust and long hours. At the exhaustion not just in his body, but in his spirit. He kept going, eyes glassy. A tear slipped down Mia's cheek before she realized it was coming. His voice dropped, ragged. Her breath trembled. "Ethan." He shook his head, pressing the heel of his palm to his eye. "And instead of talking to you, instead of letting you in, I thought if I provided enough, if I kept everything afloat, maybe." He exhaled shakily. "Maybe I could outrun it." Mia pressed a hand to her mouth. He looked at her, then really looked. Vulnerable, scared, stripped bare. The kitchen hummed with the refrigerator's low buzz. A car passed outside. The lake wind brushed the windows. Inside, Mia's heart twisted, because she saw the truth in him, the fear, the pride, the desperation to be strong. She felt the weight he carried alone too heavy for one person, especially someone who'd always believed he wasn't allowed to be fragile. She understood, and yet, she wiped her cheek, voice steady but soft. "Ethan, I'm sorry you're going through that. I am. But you didn't just carry it alone." Her eyes met his, clear and wounded. "You pushed me out." He closed his eyes. "You hid from me," she whispered. "You shut me out of your fear. And in the process, you left me alone with mine." He swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to, but you did." More tears slipped down. "And I've been walking around this house feeling like a shadow, like I don't matter, like you don't see me at all." He reached for her hand instinctively. She pulled hers back, not angrily, but with a grief so deep it stilled the air. "Mia," he whispered. "Do you understand," she said quietly, "that your fear doesn't erase my loneliness?" He looked shattered. And for a moment, the quiet between them felt like the edge of something neither knew how to step away from or how to cross. Silence settled across the kitchen again, but this time it wasn't sharp or explosive. It was heavy, slow, like dust falling after a collapse. Ethan sat hunched forward, elbows braced on his knees, hands loosely clasped, as if he didn't know whether to hold on or let go. The raw confession he had just poured out seemed to echo off every corner of the room. Mia's breathing had steadied, but her heart felt strangely distant, like it was standing on a shoreline watching waves roll in from a storm she hadn't asked for. She studied him in the faint kitchen, like the lines of stress carved deeper than she'd noticed before, the slump in his shoulders, the vulnerability he'd hidden so fiercely. She wasn't unmoved, but she wasn't undone either. After a long moment, she spoke. "Ethan, I hear you. I hear your fear. And I'm truly sorry you're going through something so frightening." He lifted his head, eyes hopeful, almost desperate. "But," she continued gently, "your fear doesn't erase my pain." His expression crumpled. She wrapped both hands around her cooling mug, grounding herself. "These past years haven't just been hard. They've been lonely. I've felt shut out, dismissed, ignored. Like I was talking to a wall, instead of a partner." He swallowed, throat tight. "I didn't mean." She raised a hand not to stop him harshly, but to hold the space. "Maybe you didn't mean to, but intent doesn't erase impact. I've spent so long trying to make excuses for you that somewhere along the way, I stopped making space for myself." He lowered his gaze. "And I need you to understand something," she said softly. "The divorce papers. They're real." His head snapped up. Fear flickered again. "I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't trying to scare you." She pressed her lips together. "I was tired. Tired of waiting for you to notice I've been disappearing." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. She continued, voice calm, steady. "But I don't want to make a decision you aren't even allowed to be part of. You deserve to know the truth of where I am. And I deserve to hear the truth of where you are." He nodded slowly, eyes shining with something like grief. "So, here's what I'm offering," Mia said, sitting a little straighter, as if drawing a clear line between what was and what needed to be. "One path. One very narrow path." His breath hitched a fragile sound. "I will hold off filing for 90 days, she said. 3 months. A flicker of hope appeared, but it didn't steady. It wavered. "During those 90 days, she continued, you have to show me, not tell me, not promise me. Show me that things can be different." He leaned forward, nodding too quickly. "I can do that, I swear, Mia." She lifted her palm again. "Wait. Listen." He fell quiet. "These are the conditions," she said. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised even her. "First," she said, "you need to tell your doctor you want me included in your care. No more hiding, no more going alone. I can't support you if you won't let me in." His jaw trembled. "Okay." "Second," she said, "we start counseling together, once a week. Non-negotiable." He nodded, blinking hard. "Yes, I'll go. I don't care how much it costs or what the schedule is." "This isn't about cost," Mia said softly. "It's about effort." "I know," he whispered. She continued. "And third, you have to set boundaries at work. Real ones. Not words, not promises. I want to see them in your schedule. I want to see you home for dinner, more nights than not. He exhaled, a sound like surrender. I can do that. I will. But you have to do it consistently, she said, leaning back, folding her arms gently as if cradling her own truth. If you can't, if work always comes first, if fear always wins, then nothing changes. He nodded again, slower now, a seriousness settling over him. And Ethan? He looked up. At the end of those 3 months, she said, voice trembling but resolute, if I still feel alone, if nothing feels different, I will sign those papers myself. And I will send them in. His throat bobbed in a swallow so heavy it looked painful. Mia. His voice broke. I can't lose you. She blinked, tears gathering but not falling. He inhaled sharply, shoulders rising. He wasn't looking at a threat. He was looking at the truth. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a fight they'd forget. This was the line in the sand. She saw the realization hit him. The real one. Not panic, not defensiveness, but something deeper, understanding. Understanding that he'd spent years drifting farther and farther away from the woman who once sat beside him on a tailgate dreaming about the future. Understanding that this was the moment the future changed direction, one way or the other. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers pressed to his lips. Tears slipped down his cheeks, quiet and stunned. I'll do it, he whispered. All of it. Not because I'm afraid you'll leave, but because you deserve more than what I've given you. A single tear slid down Mia's cheek then. She wiped it away gently. We both deserve more, she said softly. The wind rustled the trees outside. A lonely branch scraped against the window. Somewhere deep in the house, the pipes hummed, carrying warm water to places that needed it. Between them, something fragile hung in the air, not forgiveness, not yet but possibility. The tiniest flicker of it, and possibility was sometimes the first step toward hope. But neither spoke again. They just sat there, breathing the same quiet air, knowing the next 3 months would decide everything. Not promises, not memories, not fear. Action, consistency, presence. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, as if committing those words to whatever part of him finally understood the cost of losing her. And Mia, sitting across from him, felt the smallest shift inside, subtle, uncertain, like a tide that wasn't turning yet, but might. Ethan woke before the alarm. For the first time in years, it wasn't work that dragged him out of sleep. It was the memory of the look on Mia's face the night before. A quiet, steady pain he had caused. A line she had drawn that he finally understood was real. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his hands over his face. The house was still, the sky outside only beginning to pale. Usually he would have grabbed his phone, first checking emails, scanning updates, preparing himself for the day like a man bracing for impact. But today, he didn't reach for it. He stood, padded toward the kitchen, and flicked on the small overhead light. The room glowed in soft yellow, shadows stretching gently across the floor. For a moment, he simply stood there, hands on the counter, unsure where to start. Coffee, he decided. He reached for the beans, grinding them carefully, too carefully. He didn't want to make noise. The grinder roared anyway, louder than he remembered, and he winced. Upstairs, he heard movement, a soft thump, then silence again. He brewed enough for 2 cups. His hand hesitated over the mugs he reached for the one she liked, the pale blue ceramic with the tiny chip near the handle. He poured slowly, steam curling upward. When Mia stepped into the kitchen, the smell met her first. Then the sight. Ethan standing by the counter, not dressed for work yet, 2 cups ready, no boots on, no phone in hand. She paused. He cleared his throat, turning awkwardly. Morning. Her voice was soft. Morning. I made you coffee, he said, sounding uncertain, as if he needed permission to offer it. She looked at the cup. Then at him. Thank you. He handed it to her. Their fingers brushed lightly, and he felt that small contact all the way up his spine. She took a sip, nodded once, and sat at the table. He joined her. Not as close as before, but closer than he usually did. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan inhaled and tried something unfamiliar. He asked about her. So, what do you have going on today at the library? It felt strange on his tongue, like speaking in a language he hadn't used in years. Mia blinked, surprised. We're hosting a morning story time, and I'm helping Mrs. Landry find books for her grandson's science project. She hesitated. And I'm weeding out old titles from the mystery section. He nodded slowly, listening. Actually listening. Sounds like a full day. She studied him, searching for sarcasm or disinterest. She didn't find it. He held her gaze for a second too long, maybe, and then looked down at his mug. When he grabbed his lunchbox an hour later, he left his phone on the counter. Mia noticed. He hesitated by the door. I'll be home by 6:30. That's the goal. She didn't say anything, but she nodded. As he stepped outside, she exhaled, long, shaky, not relief, not belief, something in between. At the job site, the morning chaos hit him like usual workers, shouting measurements, steel beams being shifted into place, the crane whining as it lifted a load of concrete. Dust swirled in the air, thick enough to taste. Ethan tried to fall back into rhythm, but the truth was, he felt off balance. Every time he reached for his pocket, he found nothing. His phone sat dozens of miles away, on the kitchen counter where he'd forced himself to leave it. He found the site supervisor, Mark, near the temporary office trailer. I need to adjust my hours, Ethan said without preamble. And I won't be answering calls past 7 p.m. From now on, Mark's eyebrows shot up. Since when? Since now. From across the lot, the younger project manager Kyle, sharp smiled and overly eager smirked. Going part-time, old man? Ethan ignored the jab, but his jaw tightened. Mark crossed his arms. Yeah, Ethan said simply. I'm sure. Mark studied him, eyes narrowing, less judgment, more curiosity. After a long second, he nodded. All right, but you better not vanish on us. I won't. He meant it, but he also meant what he'd told Mia. He couldn't keep living the way he had been. At 2:10 p.m., he walked into the audiology clinic, shoulders tense. Mia was already there, sitting in a small upholstered chair in the waiting room. She looked up when the door chimed. You came, she said quietly. I said I would. She stood, smoothing her sweater. They didn't hug. They didn't touch. But they stood facing each other for a moment that felt almost like a beginning. Inside the exam room, the doctor gently explained everything Ethan had been carrying alone. The hearing loss, the pressure behind the eye, the need for ongoing monitoring. Mia listened with steady composure until the doctor turned to her and said, These kinds of conditions can be managed better when you have support. Something flickered across her face, something like grief at realizing how long he had struggled in silence. She nodded. I'm here. Ethan swallowed hard, staring at the floor. When they walked out of the clinic, the daylight felt too bright. Too honest. He made it home by 6:28. Mia was sitting on the porch swing, watching the lake ripple under the wind. She didn't look surprised when his truck pulled in, but something in her posture softened just a little. He joined her, holding a small paper bag. Picked up takeout from your favorite Thai place. She smiled faintly. Pad see ew? With extra broccoli. She let out a breath that might have been a laugh, or might have been relief. They sat together on the swing, sharing containers of warm noodles. The wood creaked beneath them, rocking gently. The kind of movement that used to be second nature between them. Conversation was halting at first. How was work? She asked. Dusty, he answered, making a face. She snorted. It always is. He looked at her then. Yeah, but today was different. A small silence followed, lighter than the ones before. He gestured to her container. You always steal the broccoli from mine, so I ordered yours with extra. She looked down, cheeks warming. I do not. You absolutely do. She shook her head, biting back a smile. Just one or two pieces. He raised his brows. Despite herself, despite everything, Mia laughed. A real laugh. Soft but genuine. Ethan froze, not visibly, but inside, because it had been so long since he'd heard that sound from her. And then she froze too. The smile faded as quickly as it appeared. She looked away, eyes on the lake, as if ashamed of a feeling she wasn't ready to trust. He swallowed. She shifted slightly, putting a few inches more space between them. Not rejection, not punishment, just self-protection. And he understood. The porch swing rocked gently, creaking in the quiet evening, as the sun dipped low across the water. Small warmth, uneasy hope, a beginning that wasn't safe, but wasn't impossible either. 2 weeks into the 90-day trial, Ethan felt as if he were walking on a tightrope, stretched between two cliffs, his marriage on one side, and the career he'd built with sweat and decades of long days on the other. Every morning brought a new test. Every evening, a new reckoning. Some days he did well. Others, he wasn't so sure. But today was different. Today was the kind of day that used to swallow him whole. The job site buzzed with tension. The company had just been shortlisted for a massive contract, one that could reshape their entire year. The kind of contract that made supervisors nervous and managers hyper-focused, and the kind that drew attention from the Texas investment group backing the project. Ethan was halfway through reviewing blueprints when his phone buzzed. A message from Mark. Investors want a call tonight. 7 p.m. His stomach dropped. 7 o'clock. He closed his eyes for a moment. Tonight was supposed to be their first official date night, something simple. Just dinner at the little Italian place down the road. The kind of place with candles in old wine bottles and checkered tablecloths. Mia had made the reservation. He had promised, maybe more seriously than he'd promised anything in years, that he'd be there. He rubbed his jaw, pacing behind the trailer. If I say no, he thought, I could lose leverage. I could lose respect. Maybe even the contract. But if he said yes, his chest tightened. Then what were the last 2 weeks for? What was that night in the kitchen for? What was her pain for? He stared at the message again, thumb hovering. Old instincts stirred. The urge to fix everything, to prove himself, to be the dependable one, to carry the load alone. For 10 long seconds, he almost replied with the same words he'd typed 1,000 times. I'll be there. But his hand froze. His pulse hammered. No, not like before. Not this time. He shoved the phone deep into his pocket, grabbed his gear, and headed toward his truck, heading home earlier than usual. Each mile felt heavier than the last. Mia was setting 2 plates on the counter when she heard the gravel crunch. She glanced at the clock. It wasn't even 5:30. She tried not to read too much into that. Tried not to let a flicker of hope twist inside her chest. She wiped her hands on a towel and waited. Ethan stepped in through the mudroom, shoulders tight, eyes troubled. She sensed it before he spoke. What's wrong? She asked gently. He hesitated just a second, but enough for her to recognize the old reflex. The instinct to protect her from his stress, or hide behind it. But then he exhaled, steadying himself. There's a conflict, he said, with the company. Her hands paused above the counter. What kind of conflict? Investors from Texas want a call tonight. His voice thickened. At 7, she didn't move, didn't sigh, didn't accuse. She just stood still, studying him. The quiet stretched long enough to make him shift on his feet. I told them I'd get back to them, he added, because that part mattered. Mia didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. This is the moment. The moment I learn who you are now. He swallowed. I don't know what the right choice is here. She tilted her head slightly. I think you do. That wasn't anger. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't even disappointment. It was truth. He nodded once, slowly. Yeah? I guess I do. He pulled out his phone, hands trembling, and opened the email thread. His reflection stared back at him from the black screen. Tired. Older. Worn thin. Mia deserves a partner who shows up. Her words echoed in him. He began typing. I'm unavailable at 7 p.m. I can do 5 p.m. or 9 p.m. Let me know which works. He hesitated, thumb hovering above send. This could cost him professionally. Not just tonight, maybe for months, maybe longer. But he pictured Mia sitting at that dinner table on their anniversary, the candles, the food, the silence. He hit send. A small whoosh. A decision sealed. He lowered the phone slowly. "They're going to be angry," he said. "Probably," she replied softly. "I might lose standing." "You might?" she agreed. He looked up. "But I didn't want to choose them over us. Not again." Something gentle flickered across her face. Not quite a smile, but something close. The phone buzzed in his hand. He flinched. Mia didn't look away from him while he opened the reply. The message was curt, pushy, impatient. 7 is the only option. We don't reschedule for individual managers. Ethan let out a long, steady breath. He typed again. "Then it will need to be tomorrow." Mark's name lit the screen next. "What are you doing?" "Clark?" He typed back. "What I should have done years ago." Then he placed the phone on the counter face down and stepped closer to Mia. "I don't know if I'm doing this perfectly," he admitted. His voice had softened, almost raw. "But I'm trying." She inhaled, slow and measured, as if his words touched something she didn't want to expose too quickly. "That matters," she said quietly. He reached for his jacket. "We should go." "The reservation's at 7. She blinked, surprised. "I wrote it down," he said. "So, I wouldn't mess this up." For the first time in a long time, something like warmth slipped between them, tentative, delicate, but real. They stepped out into the cool evening air. The trees rustled overhead. The lake shimmered in the distance. And as they walked toward the truck, Mia glanced sideways at him. "You know," she murmured, 2 weeks ago, you would have taken that call." He nodded. "I know. And tonight, you chose differently." He met her eyes. "Yeah, I did." A small silence followed, gentle, not heavy. But under it all, she felt something she hadn't dared feel in years. Hope. Just a sliver. And that terrified her as much as it comforted her. The storm came in fast. One moment, the sky over the lake was a muted slate gray. The next, it cracked open with a jagged streak of lightning that lit up the entire shoreline. Thunder rolled across the water, deep and shaking, like the earth itself groaning awake. The wind slapped against the siding of the house hard enough to rattle the windows. Inside, the living room glowed with the soft amber light of a single lamp. The power had flickered twice already. A stack of worksheets lay between Ethan and Mia on the coffee table, homework from their couples counselor. They were supposed to share one memory that still hurt. Not the biggest one, not the most dramatic, just one moment that had stayed inside them longer than they meant to hold it. Mia had gone first. She told him about a late autumn evening, 3 years earlier, when she had made homemade chili and waited for him until almost midnight. He'd walked through the door with a laugh on his breath, still chatting with someone on his Bluetooth earpiece, shrugging out of his jacket without even looking at her. "That night," she said softly, "I realized I'd stopped expecting you to come home to me. I just hoped." The power flickered again as she said it. Ethan absorbed her words slowly, painfully, as if they were pressing into his chest. He had apologized. Not defensively. Just honestly. The kind of apology that came from a man who finally saw the damage he'd caused. Now it was his turn. He sat forward, elbows on his knees, turning the worksheet in his hands. Rain smacked against the window in angry bursts. Somewhere outside, a tree branch cracked. Mia watched him in the dim light, watched the hesitation in his jaw, the weight gathering in his shoulders. "I think," he began, "the memory that comes back most is the night I found the divorce papers." Mia inhaled. He glanced at her, then back down. "I don't blame you, I don't. But seeing my name on that envelope, I felt something in me drop. Like a part of my life I thought was rock solid, just disappeared." He exhaled shakily. "That night scared me." But before Mia could respond, a sharp vibration cut through the room. Ethan's phone. It buzzed on the table, skittering slightly against the wood. He ignored it. The power flickered again. Another buzz. Then another. Then a steady chorus, call after call. Mia's eyes drifted toward it. You should check. He did. The screen lit up with Mark's name first. Then the project manager. Then the assistant superintendent. 3 missed calls in 15 seconds. A text banner appeared. Emergency. Call now. His stomach twisted. He answered. What happened? Ethan said, standing instinctively. Mark's voice thundered through the line, half drowned out by the storm on his end. We've got a partial collapse at the Ridgeview site. Lightning flashed across the living room. Ethan pressed a hand to his forehead. 6 figures of bad, Mark snapped. The investors are losing their minds. We need you down here. Ethan's pulse quickened. In this storm? We don't have a choice, Mark said. Those words, the old words, the words that used to control him completely. He glanced toward the window, wind-bending trees, rain blurring everything beyond the glass. Then he looked at the counselor worksheets. Then at Mia. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't angry. She simply watched him with an expression he couldn't decipher. Just waiting. Waiting to see which man he was now. Mark's voice hammered through the phone. Ethan, you hearing me? This is serious. His breath rushed in shallow, uneven bursts. Old instinct told him, go. Fix it. Be the one they rely on. Then another thought rose quieter, but firmer, and lose her. Again. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they went straight to Mia. She didn't speak, but her hands rested gently in her lap, steady. Trusting him to choose, not pushing him one way or the other. He lifted the phone again. Mark, he said quietly. Yeah? Thunder boomed outside. I'm not driving 40 minutes in this storm. Mark sputtered. Are you out of your mind? We need you. You have other managers, Ethan said. Use them. Silence on the line. Except for the storm. Clark, if you walk away from this. I'm not walking away, he said. Not from the job, but I am choosing where I'm needed most tonight. Mark cursed under his breath. Then, the line went dead. Ethan set the phone down. His hands shook violently at first, then slowly less and less. He exhaled, a long, heavy breath that seemed to take years of instinct with it. He sat back down across from Mia. For a long moment, neither spoke. Lightning lit up the room again. The power flickered once more, but held. Finally, Mia said, very softly, You stayed. He nodded. I did. He looked exhausted. He looked terrified. He looked different. And Mia felt something uncoil in her chest. Not trust, not yet, but something close to recognition. As if for the first time in years, she was looking at the man she used to know. The one who held her hand on long drives. The one who showed up to her late shifts with warm food and tired eyes. The one who once chose her easily, effortlessly. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the house felt steady. Ethan picked up the worksheet again. His hands still trembled, but he didn't run. He didn't reach for the phone. He didn't apologize or make excuses. He simply said, Let's finish talking, if you're still willing. And Mia, heart cautious but undeniably warm, nodded. The storm could wait. The investors could wait. The company could wait. For once, Ethan Clark did not. The days that followed didn't transform their marriage overnight. There was no grand rebirth, no cinematic sweep of perfection settling over the Clark household. Instead, change came the way spring does in the Midwest. Quietly, unevenly, pushing through patches of lingering winter. Ethan tried. Sometimes beautifully, sometimes clumsily. One morning, he insisted on making breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. He whisked the eggs too fast, too long, and cooked them too hot, leaving them half runny and half rubbery. He pushed the plate toward Mia with an apologetic grin. They're terrible, he admitted. She took a bite, winced, laughed softly into her napkin. They are, she agreed. He laughed too, rubbing the back of his neck. I know, she said. That's why I'm still eating them. It wasn't about the food. It was about him being here. Another afternoon, she found him wrestling with the new TV settings. scowling as the captions scrolled across the screen too fast, too small. "Why does everything have to be so complicated?" he muttered. "Because the world thinks everyone has perfect hearing," she said gently. He gave her a sideways glance. Clearly not designed for middle-aged construction guys. She slid onto the couch beside him and took the remote. "Here," she said, navigating slowly, explaining each step. "This will keep the captions big enough so you don't have to blast the volume." He watched her hands move, grateful in a quiet way he didn't know how to express. "Thanks," he said softly, once the words appeared crisp and clear on the screen. She smiled. "That better?" "Yeah," he said. "A lot. Small moments, but steady ones." Some days, they would drive to the lake together, nothing fancy, just a 10-minute loop along the shoreline. He kept his phone in the glove compartment now, not on the dashboard. No ringing, no buzzing, just the hum of the truck and the soft rhythm of their breathing. They didn't fill the ride with words. They didn't need to. Sometimes presence was louder than conversation, but not everything was smooth. They still argued. Not constant fights, but friction from years of disconnected living didn't just disappear. One evening, he forgot to pick up the salad she needed for dinner. Her teeth clenched, shoulders going rigid not because of the salad, but because she was so used to being forgotten. He noticed the shift immediately. "Mia, I'm sorry," he said. "I got distracted at the register. I didn't do it on purpose." She nodded slowly, taking a deeper breath than the situation seemed to require. "I'm trying not to." He stepped closer, touching her arm lightly. They were not perfect, but they were present. And presence, it turned out, was a kind of medicine. Counseling was harder. Their therapist, a calm woman with a gentle voice, had a way of finding the bruised places under their calm expressions. Some sessions left them raw. Others left them unexpectedly tender. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult appointment, they walked to the parking lot in silence. Ethan reached for her hand hesitantly, as if expecting her to pull away. She didn't. Their fingers intertwined naturally, just like they used to on the tailgate of his truck when they were younger. Hungrier for life, and unbelievably in love. They held hands all the way to the car. One night, Ethan went upstairs for a shower after a long day on site. Mia listened to the sound of the water running above her, the steady rush, a familiar reminder of all the nights she once waited for him to come home. But tonight felt different. Tonight she wasn't waiting. She was choosing. She walked to the hallway desk, pulled open the bottom drawer, and took out the envelope she had tucked there weeks ago. The lamp cast a warm glow across the pages as she unfolded them. Her eyes landed on the first line she had read so many times in the last month. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The words no longer hit like a blade. They rested in her hand like something heavy but not unbearable. Not like before. She sat quietly, feeling the weight of everything that had led her here. The loneliness, the anger, the fear, the resolve, and now the tentative hope. She reached for a manila folder and slid the papers inside, smoothing the edges. Then she picked up a pen. On the front, she wrote, "Only if I disappear again." Her hand shook as she set the pen down. Not from fear, but from clarity. She wasn't pretending everything was healed. She wasn't forgiving blindly. She wasn't erasing the past. She was protecting her future, not just theirs, but hers. She stood, holding the folder against her chest for a moment, then walked to the storage closet. She pushed aside an old box of blankets, lifted the lid of another filled with family photos and winter gloves, and placed the folder deep inside. Not in reach, not forgotten, not gone. A promise to herself, tucked between her memories. She whispered into the quiet room, barely audible, as if the words were more for her heart than the walls. "I'm not ready to give up, but I'm not willing to lose myself again either." Thunder echoed faintly from the storm that had passed earlier, now just a distant rumble over the lake. Upstairs, the water shut off. Footsteps. Then Ethan's gentle humming off key, familiar, warm. Mia closed the closet door. She wasn't stepping back into blindness. She was stepping in with her eyes open, and for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough. Ethan didn't say where they were going. He simply told Mia to bring a jacket, then held open the passenger door of his truck the way he used to hand on the top frame, waiting until she settled before closing it gently. The late afternoon sun dipped low, a warm gold slanting across the windshield. The air was cool, that crisp kind of cool that signaled the tail end of summer giving way to fall. They drove with the windows cracked, letting in the scent of cut grass and distant wood smoke. Mia watched the familiar streets pass by, then the less familiar ones, until they were on the edge of town, where houses thinned out and the land broadened into quiet fields. It wasn't until Ethan turned down a gravel lane that she realized where they were, the old baseball field. She hadn't been here in years, maybe a decade. The place where early in their marriage, back when money was tight and weekends were simple, they'd sat on metal bleachers sharing hot dogs from the concession stand. They'd laughed at Little League chaos, debated baby names, and imagined a life that felt both impossibly far and wonderfully close. Now the wooden sign at the entrance was cracked. The bleachers rusted. Grass grew wild at the edges, creeping over the foul lines. Time had touched everything here, maybe harder than it should have. Ethan parked beneath the lone maple tree and turned off the engine. For a moment, they stayed in the quiet truck, listening to cicadas restarting their evening chorus. Then he said quietly, "I've wanted to come back here for a long time. Just didn't know how to ask." She nodded, throat tight. "I didn't think this place even existed anymore." "Oh, it exists," he murmured. "Just like some things don't disappear, even when we pretend they do." They walked toward the bleachers slowly, gravel crunching beneath their shoes. Mia's hand brushed against his once, accidentally, and neither of them pulled away. When they reached the middle row, their old spot, Ethan gestured for her to sit. The metal was cool beneath them, a little rough with age. Their knees touched lightly, a small anchor in a place filled with ghosts of who they used to be. Mia looked out at the empty field. "It's smaller than I remember," she said. Ethan nodded. "We were younger then. Everything felt bigger." She smiled faintly. "We used to sit here and talk about having 2 kids. A boy and a girl. I remember." She swallowed. "We never did." "No," he said softly. "We didn't. There were reasons they never said out loud. A miscarriage so early, so quiet, that hardly anyone knew. A grief they both buried, each thinking the other was coping better. Then life swept them up. Work, bills, long days. The conversation drifted away, as if children had been an idea someone else once dreamed. Mia blinked hard. "Sometimes I wonder who we would have been if that time had gone differently." Ethan stared at the field, jaw tightening. "I wonder that too." A long silence settled, a silence not of distance, but of memory. Then Ethan took a breath, steadying himself. "Mia, I owe you an apology. Not the kind I've given before. Not the easy ones." She turned slightly toward him. "I'm sorry for missing dinners. For the nights you waited, and I didn't even notice." He paused. "But more than that, I'm sorry for the way I made you feel. Small, overdramatic. Like you were the problem instead of the person asking for connection." Her eyes softened, but she waited. Ethan's voice cracked. "I called your feelings emotional, when really, they were warnings. You were trying to tell me we were drifting, and I treated it like background noise." Mia drew a slow breath. "You did," she whispered. "And I started to believe maybe I really was asking for too much." He shook his head firmly. "You weren't." Another quiet moment passed. A bird settled on the outfield fence, shaking off its wings. Then Mia spoke. "I'm sorry too." Her voice was gentle, but heavy with truth. "For all the times I swallowed my hurt instead of saying it out loud. For all the times I tiptoed around you, thinking being silent would keep the peace." He looked at her, surprised. She continued. "I thought, if I didn't make waves, you'd come back on your own. That if I stayed small enough, quiet enough, patient enough, you'd see me again." Her voice trembled. "But all that did was make me disappear faster." His breath caught. "Mia," She blinked, tears slipping free. The truth is, I thought you'd already chosen. I thought you chose work. And I was too proud to beg you to choose me. The confession hung in the cooling air, raw and unguarded. Ethan's eyes glistened. I did choose work, he said quietly. He ran a hand over his face, voice thick. That was the day I realized I might lose the only person who has ever truly known me. The only person I've ever actually wanted a life with. Mia's breath shuddered. Then why? Why did it take that for you to see? He shook his head, helpless. Because I was stupid. And scared. And too wrapped up in being needed at work. To notice I wasn't being needed at home because I wasn't there to be needed. Mia's tears fell freely now. Not wild, but soft. The kind that released years of unspoken things. Ethan's hand moved toward hers slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their fingers intertwined on the cold metal bench, warm palms, pressed together, in a place haunted by old dreams not gone. Just dust-covered. Above them, the sky shifted from gold to pink. Mia inhaled, shaky but full. He nodded. We did. But we're not lost, she added, her voice barely audible. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, letting the words settle. We're not, he agreed. The breeze picked up, carrying the scent of damp earth and fading sunlight. They sat shoulder to shoulder, watching the empty field with something like peace growing quietly between them, not complete, not perfect, but real. And enough to make both of them wonder, maybe, for the first time in a long time, if what they lost could still become something new. Something worth rebuilding. Something worth choosing. 6 months passed. Not swiftly. Not easily, but with intention steps forward, a few steps back. And steady ground gained again. Winter had come and gone. The lake had frozen, thawed, and now breathed again under the soft warmth of early spring. Birds returned to the shoreline, weaving morning songs through the shifting light. And on a quiet Saturday morning, just after dawn, Mia and Ethan sat together on the porch, swing the same swing she once sat on alone, evening after evening, wondering if her marriage was already a ghost. Now, they sat shoulder to shoulder, wrapped in a thick blanket, both wearing faded sweatshirts. Steam curled from the mugs in their hands. The horizon glowed pale gold, smoothing across the water like a promise whispered gently. Today wasn't their wedding anniversary, but it had become something just as important, their new anniversary, the day she'd left the envelope on the kitchen table, the day she had chosen not to disappear quietly anymore, the day their life broken, bruised, but salvageable had shifted course. Ethan's hearing aids were in, small silver arcs behind each ear, catching the sunlight as if they belonged there. He didn't hide them anymore. Didn't apologize for them. Didn't pretend he could hear something he couldn't. Beside him, Mia let her head rest lightly against his shoulder. Neither spoke at first. The porch creaked gently beneath them. The lake sighed. The world drifted awake. Finally, Ethan set his mug down and reached beneath the swing. He pulled out a small wooden box, smooth, hand-carved, its surface shaped with patience rather than perfection. Mia lifted her head, brows rising. You made that? He nodded, awkwardly proud. Took me a while. I had help watching YouTube videos, and I might have destroyed a few pieces of wood. She smiled softly. He placed the box in her lap. Her fingers hovered over it. The wood was warm, like it held the memory of his hands. She opened it slowly. Inside lay her wedding ring, the original one, the simple band with small scratches from the early years, the one she had stopped wearing on the day everything cracked. Now it shone with new polish, resized, restored, subtle but unmistakably changed. Inside the band, etched small and precise, was an inscription. Seen, chosen, every day. Mia's breath caught. Not because it was grand, but because it wasn't. It was humble, intentional. A promise he had already been living. Ethan didn't kneel, didn't give a sweeping speech, just kept his voice low, steady, truthful. I can't promise I'll never mess up again, he said. I'm human, flawed. I'll get distracted, I'll forget things. I'll need reminders. She looked at him, really looked, and saw no script, no performance. Just him. But what I can promise, he continued, is this. Mia closed her eyes briefly, letting the words settle in the place where doubts used to echo. When she opened them again, he was still looking at her, not with fear, not with desperation, but with a kind of gentle certainty she hadn't seen in years. She picked up the ring, holding it lightly between her fingers. It felt both familiar and new, like a story they were rewriting together. But she didn't slide it on. Not yet. She shifted on the swing, turning slightly so she could face him fully. "And I promise you this," she said softly. "I'll never disappear silently again." Emotion tightened his face. "If I'm hurting, I'll say it out loud. If something needs to change, I'll speak up. I won't wait until I'm breaking to tell you." He nodded, slow, reverent. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I'll fight for us," she said. "But I'll fight for me too." His eyes glistened. Then he let out a small, shaky breath that sounded like relief. She looked down at the ring once more. Then, with a calmness that came not from blind hope but from earned trust, she slid it back onto her finger. This time, she didn't feel like a woman trying to hold on to something slipping away. She felt like a woman standing firmly in her worth, choosing with clarity, not desperation. The metal settled against her skin like it belonged there. Like it always had. "It fits," she whispered. "So do we," Ethan murmured. The porch swing creaked again, swaying just enough to make their shoulders brush. The lake shimmered as the sun broke the horizon, stretching gold across the rippling surface. Inside the house, Ethan's phone sat on the kitchen counter, on silent. Neither of them was thinking about it. They stayed like that, hands linked, breath mingling in the cool morning air. Two people who had walked to the edge of loss and stepped back. Not because love alone saved them, but because they learned to choose each other with open eyes. The swing rocked gently. Birdsong filled the yard. And in the warm quiet between them, a new chapter settled into place. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but wholly, beautifully theirs. Sometimes, healing begins where we least expect it, in the quiet moment when someone finally chooses to stay. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. Ethan and Mia's story isn't about perfection or grand gestures. It's about two people relearning how to show up for each other. Slowly, awkwardly, honestly. It's about the courage to speak the truth before it hardens into silence, and the grace to listen before it becomes too late. And maybe the gentlest lesson of all is this. Love doesn't survive on memories, it survives on presence. On small choices made in ordinary moments. On noticing the person who sits across from you, not just once, but again and again. We don't always get back the years we lose, but sometimes we get a second chance at the years ahead. And when that happens, choosing each other with open eyes can be its own kind of miracle. Thank you, truly, for spending this time with us. Your presence here means more than you know. Every like, every share, every subscribe isn't just support for the channel. It's a way of spreading a little more kindness, a little more understanding, into a world that desperately needs both. Thank you for being here with us. Every like, share, and subscribe helps us tell more stories that touch the soul. We'll see you in the next one.